beauties, what is up? Welcome to another episode of Mystery Monday. Today for this episode I am eating Nutella pancakes. Now the only thing missing is fresh fruit, which I didn't have any of in my fridge at the moment. Unfortunately, I could really use some strawberries on this, but it is what it is. So let me get this dressed up. Good old dollop of Nutella. And I'm just going to spread that on this pancake here. Alright. Now to add more sugar. Real Canadian maple syrup. Yummy. Alright, so we have the grub. Today's story is very sad. Today's case is very sad. It is a hot case. It is not yet a cold case. Has not been declared a cold case. However, it is an unsolved mystery. An unsolved murder mystery, if you will. And I am partly talking about this out of interest, and another part out of educating you if you haven't heard of this case, and in hopes that, since it is still an open investigation, that it will attract awareness and help catch the killer who's still out there. Now, I have done a little bit of research, but I'm not going to go into as much detail as some other YouTubers I've seen cover the story, or other websites that have covered the story. I've gotten a lot of my information, mostly all of it, from ABC News, Wikipedia, and I did watch the Delphi murder videos of another YouTuber whom I watch, named Miss Fucking Wonderful. That's her name. So I will link the Wikipedia page. I will link her channel down below. She did I think 3 videos on the Delphi murder. She's from Indiana, so I believe she is. So please check those videos out. She did a really good job at covering them, and I could tell it's something she was really passionate about. So good job on doing those videos, Katie. So and a few of you have asked me to do this, so that's another reason I've decided to do it. So basically, if you're not aware of the Delphi murders were so the Delphi murders took place in Delphi, Indiana, where Abigail Williams, 13, and Liberty German, 14. I might be reversing those ages, I'm not sure. One of them was 13, one of them was 14. So young teenage girls. They went missing on February 13th, 2017, after a family member had dropped them off at the Monon Bridge trails to go hiking, which was something they did all the time, very routine. And when their family member went to pick them up that evening, I think around 5:30 p.m. or something like that, they never showed up to be picked up, so the family members reported them missing, and their bodies were found about a half mile from the bridge on February 14th, 2017, so the next day. So, what is so amazing about this case? Liberty German managed to capture a photo of the suspect, as well as some audio on her cell phone. Another eerie thing, I'll get to that in a minute, but what I found really eerie was, on the 13th when they were hiking, in the afternoon, there was a final snap from Liberty, who had posted to Snapchat, and you can see in the background, some figures in the background, and people are wondering, are those the killers? So after the bodies were recovered, I think it was on the 22nd of February, a few days later, police released this audio, asking if anybody recognized the voice to come forward, and a tip line was set up and all this, which I have put at the beginning of this video, as well as email. If you or anybody know anything that could lead to the arrest or help solve this crime, please do so. Please use that number. So this young girl, who's about to get murdered, is able to record and capture her killer, who we think is the killer, the suspected killer. So I'm going to play the audio. It's very eerie, creepy, so if you're easily disturbed by things, you might not want to listen to it, but I think it's important to listen to it. Maybe someone out there will recognize the voice. So I'm going to play it now. You can hear this man, who we think is the man in the photo. So this is the man in the photo that was captured on her phone, and this is the audio. And we think the audio is of that man. A lot of people suspect it is the same person. You can hear him saying, "Go down the hill." Pretty eerie, isn't it? I don't have really dates and things like that, other than when it happened. But if you go to Miss Fucking Wonderful's page, she has dates and things like that. But a composite sketch was eventually released. I think it was in July. Thousands and thousands of tips have poured in, but a killer was never caught. It did lead to a few people being arrested on other charges that they had out for them. For example, most recently, August 2nd, Kevin Sellers was, a tip was called in that he might have something to do with the murders, and he was actually a suspect in the murder of his uncle from back in November 8th, 2017 in Logansport. And he actually, under investigation, ended up confessing to that, so he's in prison for that. I really, really hope they catch these killers, man. That's murder of young girls, of children. It just makes you realize the darkness that's out there in the world. It just reminds you of that, and it's a really sick feeling. And that brings us to the aftermath. What now? Well, it's still an ongoing investigation. The police have not yet come forward with information regarding how the girls were murdered. There's a lot that's still only information that's being shared with the family, such as how they were murdered, but also information such as other evidence that was on that cell phone. And I don't know about you, but I really want to know what other evidence was on there. Maybe if the public had that information, it would help find the murder even more, you know? So, as I was reading through news articles, there was, the residents are all shook up. One man reported, I remember when they interviewed one resident, I can't remember his name, one man said, I go hiking and walking on that trail all the time with my dog, and I've never seen anything unusual. And I'm thinking, yeah, dude, but you're a dude. You're an old man. Nobody wants to kidnap you and murder you, I mean, it does happen, but it's usually young girls that get snatched, In this case, anyways, it was. Another resident, named Jennifer Robinson, lives in that community. She has 3 kids, and she, said it makes every parent wonder, you have these kids that you have to protect, and it makes you afraid to let them out and just live their lives. And that's what I was thinking whenever when I read that a family member dropped them off to the entrance of these trails to go hiking alone in the wooded area. Comment below if you would allow your kids at that age, young girls 13, 14, to go hiking alone. And I know you can't shelter your kids in what ifs, but I think I would. I think it just sounded like a really bad. Maybe I'm too paranoid, but it just sounded like a really bad idea. It just really. I mean, you hear so many murders taking place in wooded areas, and kids getting snatched up and murdered in these remote areas, and it's just. I mean, it is trails that people use all the time, but even I'm afraid to go walking in the park trails sometimes because I always think of that. I know I joke that I'm a bigger girl and not going to get kidnapped, but if a sexual offender or a predator sees someone walking alone, it could trigger them, and they're just waiting to lurk. They're just lurking, waiting, to pounce, and it's just really tragic. I'm not in any way blaming the parents at all, or the family members. They just did what any, a lot of people would do, but for them to be walking alone in that wooded area, it just, maybe because I watch too many of these murder mysteries. I mean, that's all I do is watch Investigation Discovery. Let me know your thoughts. Please keep it respectful. We can all have opinions in the comments. We don't have to attack each other, we're adults. So that's all I have to say about that. I guess, again, if you want more information, there's a lot more information out there, but this case there's not really much to say because the police aren't sharing all of the information, and it's still an open case. Nobody's been caught, and then there's one suspect. So I think there was one other suspect, a Ron Logan or something like that, a property owner nearby, but yeah, I don't have any information on that. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching as always, and I'll see you next time. Hi, Foodie Beauties! Welcome to another episode of Mystery Monday. So, as you've seen by the thumbnail, I'm going to add a new feature to my Mystery Mondays. What I'm going to do is also make the mukbang a mystery. So, I'm not going to show you what I'm going to be eating or tell you what I'm going to be eating. It's going to be a surprise. Today, it's not a very, exciting surprise, but for me it is. I was just craving some really, some fruit. So, I have some banana, some frozen cherries, and some frozen raspberries. So, those of you who are new, Mystery Monday is a series I do every week discussing disappearances and strange murders or unsolved mysteries, and we usually have something to eat with it, so it's kind of like dinner and a mystery. Today I'm talking about the unsolved murder. It's very recent, it's very big in the news. Thank you guys for telling me about it. I have received tons of requests to do this case, so I thought I'd jump on it because if anybody has any information, it could really help to spread the news. It's a very strange case. It kind of reminds me of the strange case of Elisa Lam. If you're not familiar with that, I do have a Mystery Monday video on that. If you want to check that out, just look back at my videos. In regards to there being so many unanswered questions and conspiracies surrounding the murders. So grab yourself something to eat, grab yourself something to drink, and relax by the fire while we discuss this case. So 19-year-old Kanika Jenkins was last seen by her friends at a hotel party at the Crown Plaza in Rosemont near Chicago at approximately 1:30 a.m. on Saturday, September 9th. Sadly, the next day, Sunday, September 10th, her body was discovered in the walk-in freezer of the hotel kitchen. So like the Elisa Lam case, what sparked controversy is this CCTV footage that was released by the Rosemont police, which shows a very disoriented Jenkins walking, stumbling around, fumbling around, almost falling over the hotel, coming out of the elevator in the early hours of the morning. So I'm going to go over some of the timeline of this case for you. So this happened last Friday at 11:30 p.m. Teresa said goodbye to her 19-year-old daughter, Kanika Jenkins, who was going out with friends to celebrate the fact that she had just gotten a new job at a local nursing home. And that would be the last time, sadly, that Miss Martin would ever see her daughter. So this is based on recent footage I've seen, where apparently on Saturday, at around 1:33 a.m., the CCTV footage in the hotel captures Kanika walking into the hotel with a group of friends. Around that same time, Lenore Harris, who is Kanika's sister, speaks to her on the phone while Kanika is out with her friends. Then the timeline jumps ahead to around 3:20 a.m. Jenkins is seen on the surveillance stumbling around the front lobby, the front desk. And I'm going to show you some of the pictures, but I'm also going to link below, some channels that have videos out where they show the actual footage. You can actually see the surveillance footage. And it's kind of disturbing. You see her like staggering. She's really staggering, looking like she's really on something. She's very disoriented, like she's drunk. You see her almost falling over, grabbing onto a rail. You see her coming out of the elevator in the footage as well. So she's coming out of the elevator, stumbling down the hall in a few points. You also see her in the hotel kitchen. And you see her walking towards the back, towards the freezer. But then she walks out of frame, and you don't see her actually getting into the freezer. You don't see anyone around her. She's completely alone in this footage. She's completely just stumbling around alone, which is kind of strange. None of her friends, there was tons of people at this party. Nobody had seen her wander off that drunk. And to make matters more strange is that there is footage out there of the party. I'll link a few videos below if you're interested. Check out the videos. These people really dissect the videos and everything like that. She looks fine when she's walking into the hotel at 1:30, and she looks fine at the party. So there's something that happened within those 2 hours. I mean, she could have downed a bottle or something, but at the party, she looks, she doesn't look too intoxicated or anything like that, So around 4 a.m., the friends of Kanika call Kanika's mother, Miss Martin, from Kanika's car, saying they have her car keys, they have her wallet, and they have her phone. Around 5 a.m., Teresa Martin shows up at the hotel, but is told that in order to see the CCTV footage, she would need to file a missing persons report with the police. So it's not until Saturday at 1:15 p.m. that an official search for Kanika actually starts. Sometimes when I talk about these stories, I just don't have much of an appetite because it's just like so disheartening, So around Sunday, 12:48 a.m., is when they discovered Kanika's body in the walk-in freezer of the hotel kitchen. And it was in a construction area of the Crown Plaza and Conference Center in Rosemont. So we're going to talk about some theories and some questions that I've seen brought up because there's a lot of controversy. Teresa Martin, Kanika's mother, thinks that there was foul play suspected. I'm going to play an audio clip here that I found on the Chicago Tribune. I found it on this person's YouTube channel, but it's from the Chicago Tribune. And I'm going to play, I think you can hear the person's cell phone going off, so ignore that, but I'm going to play, it's a few minutes long, and it just gives her thoughts and ideas when she was interviewed on some of the problems that she encountered when dealing with authorities in this case. It must have been so frustrating for her. So give this a listen, and then we'll talk about some of the theories.
So open, so my brother walked past, and I remind you, we didn't know this was a crime scene at 4 o'clock in the morning. After they declared that she was dead, when I started asking, can I see my baby body, and they first denied me, and I asked her for the sergeant name, the police name, and the detective name, and the sergeant name. When I asked the sergeant for his badge number, then he said, I got to talk to the morgue. I said, can I see how my baby laying down there, how she died? And they wouldn't let me see my baby. But from 1:30 a.m. in the morning of today, until for like 4 hours after that, then that's when they pronounced her dead. Wait, no, they told us, she was dead at 1 something, but they didn't let me see her body until 4 hours later. They did let me see. They refused my mother, my sisters, her uncles, but they refused my family to see her. They said, only you and your daughter can see it, and you can't take pictures because it's a crime scene. It's in a deep freezer, but they had let the morgue take her, move her, defrost the freezer. Her hair had soap and water up on it. She was defrosted in the freezer. They defrosted the whole freezer. I guess that's why it gave 4 hours, right? But I asked her, can I see my daughter? Why I can't see how she died? Why I can't see? Because I know in the deep freezer, I know at my job, and it won't open there. Imagine you can't even hold your balance. So now you got to struggle, and at my job with our coolers, you got to have some strength to yank these doors open. Now imagine they said she couldn't have barely hold herself up, get alone, pull open the door. And they said the police department said freak accidents like that do happen. So they're saying, and they said they didn't see her. And there's a camera sitting right in front of the cooler. They didn't see how she got in there. So they didn't even see her yet. I said this the detective that was out there. Okay. And then this he was the one that was out there when they first discovered. They said he coming in there. We sitting in the lot. We wasn't even allowed to. When they discovered nobody, we wasn't even allowed to spend in the hotel lobby. They put us out. We had to stand outside and look, and we had to look only let us go. We just looking, just hoping and praying that we could get some kind of help. Because people looking at us like, just they're looking at us. And, looking like what they doing out here. And we was forbidden to come back in the hotel room. So we studied trying begging for help. The police department couldn't even help us. After they found my baby dead, they couldn't even help us.
It's so heart-wrenching, So this past Saturday, marked 1 week since Kanika's disappearance, and in memoriam and in protest, led by Teresa Martin, a group of people marched towards the Federal Bureau of Investigation's office in Chicago. They're really demanding that the Rosemont police hand this case over to the feds because they feel that the evidence, you know, that the footage was tampered with. They don't find that the timeline adds up. They find it very mysterious, and they don't believe, especially Miss Martin does not believe that her daughter, as disoriented and weak, you know, falling over, barely able to hang onto a railing, had to clutch the walls, would have the strength to open, you know, the strength and wherewithal to open a giant freezer, walk-in freezer door, and then shut it and shutting herself in. And that, again, reminds me of the Elisa Lam case because, you know, people have the same speculation, have the same questions and speculations, like, how did this small, young girl, who was clearly under the influence of something, how did she get into the water tank and shut the lid by herself and everything? So there's a lot of, I mean, these things are not impossible, but they're just strange. And especially to a grieving mother who, things are just not adding up, you know? So it sounds like they suspect, for some reason, someone is trying to cover something up. So they think that police or somebody has edited the footage. The biggest problem with the footage is that we cannot see her being led into, or even going into the freezer herself. So we have no idea what happened, and we have no idea how she got there. And I saw in a video that the police did say that she was led into the freezer, but how do they know that? You know, how can they make that speculation without any actual evidence or proof? Teresa Martin also claims that there is apparently a camera right in front of the freezer, and it actually wasn't triggered by, it's supposedly triggered by movement, but actually wasn't for some reason, and no footage was caught. So that is a bit mysterious. That I would like to know more about. And another theory, linked the video to as well, there's a news report that in the same area in Rosemont, there was a news report that there was a large organ bust. So there's a company, an illegitimate company, but it's a big bucks company, makes a lot of money, harvesting people's body parts and organs and things like that. So the Crown Plaza is in that same town, and some have theorized that maybe she was victimized for her body parts. Now that does seem a little far-fetched, but until we find out the cause of death, which has not yet been declared, and until we find out the autopsy reports, we're not going to know for sure. So there's a lot of mystery still shrouding this case. So was this case just a tragic, drunken accident? Or was Kanika at the wrong place at the wrong time, a victim of foul play? So at this time, the case is still considered a death investigation by police. Everything's on the table. They're still investigating it. So until then, we're not going to know for sure. So it's no matter what had happened to her, it's very tragic, and I just want to say I'm so sorry for her family to have to go through this, and for poor Kanika, that must have been horrible. She did get stuck, you know, freezing to death, disoriented and scared and alone. It's just such a horrible way to die when you have your whole life ahead of you. And I've seen videos of her and her mother together, and they're very close, so it's very heart-wrenching. And I think that's why a lot of you guys requested that I do this case, because you know, it's just touched so many people. It's so mysterious and tragic, you know. So it is very mysterious, and cases like this make you wonder. I mean, just like the Elisa Lam case, like what is it? I mean, you know, both at hotels, wandering around disoriented, alone, both coming off elevators. Well, elevators were involved in both, but I even heard of a rumor about, in both cases, the Elisa Lam and Kanika case, about the elevator game. And those of you who don't know what the elevator game is, it's apparently a game where you can look it up, but you go into an elevator. I don't know all the details, but you push, you know, different floors in a sequence that will take you eventually to another world. And I don't know what your fate is in that. I'm gonna look more into it, because I don't know. It's just weird. It's really creepy. It's a creepy legend, but things like that might seem far-fetched. But until we know for sure, I think we should just keep an open mind about things. But what do you guys think? Do you think it's just an accident, or do you have any information you can add to this? You know? Alright guys, I think I'll end the video here, but I thank you for joining me for another episode of Mystery Monday. And I was going to do the Black Dahlia, because I really want to do that case, but I will get to it. But I thought that since this Kanika case is so new, I mean, it happened last week, it would be a very appropriate time to do it. So, anyways guys, thanks for watching, and see you next time. Hey everybody, hey! How are you? How are you? Today I have, it's kind of hot, but nachos. And today's mystery is, unfortunately, the tragic disappearance of Brandy Wells, who has been missing for 11 years now. lot of you have requested certain topics be done, like the Black Dahlia, the Jean Benet Ramsey, and others. And every time you guys leave a suggestion, I copy and paste it into a list I have for my Mystery Mondays. So I will hopefully get to it. I'm going to research the cases, and if I feel appropriate for my show on Mondays here, I will definitely cover it for you guys. But cases like the Black Dahlia and Jean Benet, they are still mysteries. The murderer technically still out there. In the case of Black Dahlia, the murderer's probably deceased. It's been so long ago, and so I'm focusing kind of on a case today that is still active because the person is still missing, and we don't know what happened to her. So I'm hoping that because it's still, a case where maybe we can call attention to it, and maybe some of you out there have tips or know of this case or know people who could help with this. So that's why I'm focusing on this case today, just like I did with the Kamika Jenkins video. So let's get to this here. So basically, so Brandy Wells was an American girl at the age of 23 when she disappeared back on August 3rd, the early morning of August 3rd, 2006. She was last seen by her mother, Ellen Tant, on the evening of August 2nd, 2006, when she had surprised her mother at her home and said she was spending the night and planning on going out. So I'll just go over a bit about, I love tomatoes, over a bit about her life, her background. So she was 23, and she had surprised her mother that night, August 2nd. She had made the trip down from Brownsboro, where she was living, back to her hometown in Tyler, Texas. So those of you who are from around there might have heard about the case, Brandy was always, she was a passionate girl, always into music. She had joined a flag corps. She was, on a scholarship to Teachers College and completed 2 years before she was married. So after 2 years of college, she got married. Kind of decided, juggling home life and everything was a bit too much with college as well full time. So she decided to put the education off for a bit. So her marriage ended up not working out, and so she decided to get her life back on track. She had just taken a job at Walmart and was going back to Teachers College, getting her life back on track basically. And so before doing all of this, she wanted to, went back home, surprised her mother, and wanted a really good night out that she hadn't had in a while, So she showed up that night, August 2nd, at her mom's in Tyler, Texas. Her sister was already in bed. She had asked her godmother if she would go clubbing with her that evening, and for whatever reason her godmother declined, couldn't go, and she got ready to go out. Her mother assumed that she was going to the Electric Cowboy Club, which was nearby in their town, but Brandy actually had other plans to try out this well-known nightclub in Longview, Texas. So Brandy left her mother's home that evening, but before she left, she apparently had hardly any gas left. So she asked her mom if she could borrow her mother's car, and her mother said, I don't have much gas either. And so Brandy just said, okay, I'll deal with it. On her way, stopped at a bowling alley in Tyler to see her friend Jeanette Green, who worked there as a bartender. And she went in and had a drink on the tab, and had told Jeanette what her plans were. And Jeanette became very concerned because just a couple of decades earlier, she had a friend who had disappeared from a club in Longview as well. And she was very afraid that history would repeat itself with Brandy. But Brandy had been looking forward to this for a long time, so she was dead set and determined she was going to go either way. So she makes her way to this club in Longview, and she had to take the interstate, the I-20, westbound. The club was called Graham Central Station. I think it's closed down now. That was a long time ago. So the surveillance camera in the club shows Brandy. At that particular club, to get in at the entrance, you had to swipe your driver's license or your ID. So the video surveillance picks up Brandy swiping her ID, and later that evening, I think she left just after 12:30. Brandy leaving the club. She leaves the club alone, but you see her walk straight ahead, thinking she's going towards the parking lot. Then you see a man with a cowboy hat. He's walking. Well, it's spicy. Walking left, and then you see the shadow of her legs. She's out of view, but you see the shadow of her legs walking that way also. She makes a turn and starts walking left. So that is the last footage we have of Brandy to this day. And the next day, her mother woke up and saw that Brandy wasn't home. She had all her overnight bag, her makeup, all of that stuff was still there, but Brandy wasn't there. So she was a bit surprised, but she's 23, she went out, maybe she stayed somewhere or something like that, So it wasn't until Brandy's roommate called and was concerned, Brandy was supposed to be home that afternoon. Brandy was supposed to be home that afternoon, they had plans. Then her mother became worried. They tried calling her cell phone, it went right to voicemail. Eventually they became more and more panicked, as the hours went on. Brandy never returned their calls. Family members and her mother started calling Brandy's phone, leaving messages. And she said, Brandy would have heard the tears and panic in our voice on those messages, and she would have never ignored them. She would have returned our calls. So that's when the dread really sets in, So they file a missing report with the police, a missing persons report with the police. Her mother goes around to the club in Longview and investigates and looks around. This was after her sister, Brandy's sister, had confessed to her mother that Brandy was actually planning to go to the Grand Central Station and not the Electric Cowboy, so that gave her, more feeling of dread to her mother. She knew something must have been wrong. She was kind of, a bit hurt that Brandy wouldn't be honest about where she was going. Sometimes we hide things from our worrying parents. So 5 days later, after call-ins of reports of this car, a 2000 black Grand Prix, that was abandoned on I-20, Interstate 20, westbound, at Highway 31, just outside of Longview, there was a car, this car was on the side of the road for several days. So the police investigated, and it was determined, the license plate was checked, and it was a missing person's car. There were some strange things left in the car, some strange evidence around the car that has police believing that Brandy did not leave on her own free will. There's no glorious way to eat nachos, sorry. So in the car, the door, so when they come up to the car, it was off the side of the road at an angle, and the door was open, ajar. So it looks like somebody had, pushed it off the side of the road, or then jumped out in a hurry and had to leave in a hurry. Now, the passenger seat was pushed all the way back, and Brandy was about 4'9", 5 feet tall. So there's no way her feet would have reached the gas pedals. There were no signs of a struggle. There was no blood. There was nothing like that. Her purse and her wallet and a cell phone was found in the back seat. So the cell phone was found in the glove compartment. Her purse and wallet were in the back seat. Now, the cell phone for a while was thought to be Brandy's, but when shown to Miss Kant, her mother, she was like, that's not Brandy's cell phone, It was later determined that the cell phone found in the car was an ex-boyfriend of hers who was stationed in Iraq at the time. So that meant that Brandy's cell phone was still missing. It was about a week later, that's when the activity started registering on Brandy's cell phone again. There hadn't been anything for about a week, and then all of a sudden all this activity, 1 minute calls, usually, like her mother said that she thought it looked like the activity of like a drug deal or something. So they traced the calls, and it led them to a resident in a very seedy area, a very bad known area of Longview, Texas, known for crime and drug activity and things like that, who said his excuse was that he had been walking down the street and he found the cell phone on the grass. However, when asked to take a polygraph test, he declined, and he is still a person of interest to this day. So what happened to Brandy? I guess the questions, the theories, we can come up with scenarios such as, I forgot to mention, in her car there was also found a napkin from the bar with a name and number on it. So the police called this individual who talked about his encounter with Brandy at the club that night, and he said that she had asked, basically, kind of in an indirect way, hinting that she needed money for gas. I guess he didn't give her any, because in her car was out of gas. One thing they also found in the trunk was a gas can, and Brandy's mother said, Brandy wasn't the most organized person when it came to those things. She never knew her to have a gas can. It's not something she would have thought of to be, prepared for. So they found that strange. So either, if she had asked that guy for gas, maybe who else did she ask, Maybe her desperation for help with that regards led her into the hands of somebody who wanted to harm her. Who else did she ask for gas, Maybe she walked off on the interstate to try to find a gas station after running out of gas. But it would have been a long, long way. That interstate is mostly rural. There's not hardly any businesses, and certainly not a gas station for quite a long time. Did she get picked up by a trucker or another passerby, motorist? The possibilities of what happened to her. We just don't know for sure. So that's pretty much all we know right now. So this story was featured on Investigation Discovery series, It Disappeared. I don't know if you guys watched that. And I'm going to link below. There's a really good podcast or a YouTube video I watched by a YouTube user named Unfound Podcast. And he does, it's about an hour and 40 minutes long. It's an interview with her, Brandy's mother, Ellen Kant. And it's so sad. It's just really, really sad. It just, no matter how many years go by, there's no closure. You can't really grieve because you don't know if she's still out there. You don't know what happened to her. Your mind is just running wild. And every time I see her bright face, it breaks my heart. And I really hope that they find what happens to her. My suspicion is that she met with foul play. Somebody probably murdered her or kidnapped her. Maybe she's still out there, but... So that's the case of Brandy Wells. Let me know your thoughts if you've heard about this case. It's very, very sad. Alright, last bite. So anyways, guys, I really appreciate you watching this series. It really means a lot to me. These cases interest me, like I said, because they're just so devastating and tragic, and I hope that justice is served one day. Hi guys! Welcome to an episode of Mystery Monday. Now this Mystery Monday is kind of half-assed. I didn't get ready for you guys. I've been running around. I'm trying to get everything done. I'm a last minute person, right? So anyways, yeah, so I cooked this. This is my first time trying this baked spaghetti squash. Cheesy baked spaghetti squash. Oh goodness. This one's a bit watery. This one's a bit less. So I'm going to start with this one. But this is what it looks like, finishing product. This one is a bit more juicy. So I'm going to put that aside for now. And yeah, so nonetheless, we will have lots to talk about. So I got this cute little glass at the Dollar Tree, and I'm drinking Dasani, no sugar, naturally flavored black cherry sparkling water. I've never had spaghetti squash, funnily enough. I think you have to take the fork and kind of rake it like that, and it turns into spaghetti. It's very hot, and I did let it cool off, but it's still hot. Oh, it smells great. Today I'm going to be talking about cruise ship disappearances. One case more in depth. But it's amazing how many people each year go missing on cruise ships. It's actually more than you would think it would be. I mean, for me, a cruise ship seems like a dream vacation. And the last place really that you would think that it's a tragic, an eerie and tragic disappearance would occur. But then I think about it, and I remember that being on a very crowded ship with only miles and miles of ocean around you would kind of be a setting for a perfect crime in a way. There's the case of Rebecca Coram, a British cruise line crew member who disappeared on March 21st, 2011. She was on board the Disney Wonder cruise ship, and she was 24 at the time of her disappearance. So her disappearance was the first case aboard the Disney Cruise Lines. Now, she was last seen, a security camera picked up a phone conversation she was having in the lounge, in the crew lounge, where she seemed very emotionally distressed. And that's the last footage of Rebecca. Now another case, which I'll go into more detail of, is the case of Amy Lynn Bradley. Now, you've probably heard of this case, it's very popular. Amy was a 23-year-old from Virginia who had vanished from a family vacation on the Royal Caribbean cruise with her family in March of 1998. I think her dad, her dad's work had given him that, or he won, I can't remember, but a trip, a paid vacation for a Caribbean cruise. Who wouldn't be excited about that? Actually, I probably wouldn't. Cruises are not really my thing because they're so crowded, and I don't know. Maybe not a Caribbean cruise, maybe an Alaskan cruise, but I don't have my usual background today because, there you go. He offered to let me use the fireplace, but I thought, whatever. We'll give the fireplace a break. I'm out of firewood. So they leave for vacation, the Bradley family leaves for vacation on March 21st, 1998. And on March 24th, Amy was last seen. She had gone to the nightclub in the ship. There was a club in the ship. So she was partying in the club with the band, a few of the band members of the band Blue Orchid that was playing in the club that night. And she had been seen in particular dancing and talking with one of the band members, Alistair Douglas. Alistair claimed that he parted ways with Amy around 1 a.m. Amy's father, somewhere between 5:15 and 5:30, had reported he had woken up and went on the deck of the ship, out on the patio area. I guess in their room there was like a patio, which leads out onto the deck. And he saw Amy there just lounging and relaxing. And so he went back to bed and woke up around 6 a.m. And in that 30 minutes, when he had gone back to bed and awoken again, he went back up to the patio to see if Amy was still there, maybe to say good morning or whatever, and she was gone. So he just assumed, well, she went down for coffee, she went down for breakfast or something. So he went out to the lounge area expecting to see his daughter, but she was nowhere to be found. So they start panicking when they can't find her. And they become more frantic, and they ask the captain, to conduct a search and to please not let anybody off the ship, because the ship was about to dock in Curacao. And am I saying that right? Curacao, a little island in the Caribbean. And if they would have docked, Amy could have potentially left the ship, which would be harder to find her. They're letting a whole bunch of people off the ship who could know something about her disappearance. So the parents were really concerned about that. The captain agreed to do a search, but he did not agree. He refused to have everyone remain on the ship, basically. So that was, disheartening. Largely disheartening for the family. think she was there with her mom, her dad, and her brother. And she was really close to all of them. So the Bradleys had to make a decision. Do they stay on the ship, or do they head into Curacao to look for Amy? Because, you know, somebody said, well, she could have gotten off the ship. So they made the decision to leave the ship and go search for her in the village. They ended up finding nothing. And around dinner time, when the ship was set to sail again, head off, they had to make the decision, you know, are we going to stay and look, keep looking, or are we going to get back on the ship? They ended up staying in Curacao, which ended up being a mistake because they found out apparently that the captain had not conducted as thorough search as they thought. So they contacted the FBI, some FBI members, and the Bradleys took the next flight to, I think it was St. Martin, where they rushed there where the ship was set to dock next. So they rushed to St. Martin, and the Bradleys were very upset with the captain. You know, they were like, you didn't do a thorough search, and yada yada. So the FBI went around the ship with pictures of Amy, and they were showing everybody, and they did a more thorough search. This was on March 26th that they did this search, apparently. They did question Alistair Douglas, and they had no evidence. They had nothing, you know, to go on. So they couldn't arrest him or anything. He was, you know, not considered a suspect. He was the last to see her, as far as we know. But Amy's brother said something very interesting. She said that in the early morning, that morning that Amy disappeared, the brother was going, you know, walking around the ship looking for Amy, and he ran into Alistair, and Alistair Douglas said something very interesting to him. He said, I'm sorry about Amy. And at the time, the only people who knew about her being disappeared was the captain and the family, you know, so that's very suspicious. Very suspicious in my opinion. So that same year, I mean, the Bradleys, completely devastated, I can only imagine, had to leave their dream vacation without their daughter. Apparently there was a whole bunch of tips that came in. There was a $260,000 reward out for any information leading to, you know, any information leading to someone's arrest, or if they found Amy or something like that. I don't remember the details, but it was like $260,000 reward. I think if Amy was found. And rewards can be an incentive, but they can also be an incentive for con artists to emerge from the woodwork. And there was like a few people, a couple of Canadians apparently spotted her on the beach. They said they spotted her on the beach, and she was followed by two men, and she was walking to one guy, I think his name was David Carmichael, was on the beach, and he saw her, Amy, who he thought was Amy, walking towards him with two men behind her, intimidating looking men. And she was walking towards him, you know, making eye contact and looking like she wanted to get away. And right whenever she was about to speak to him, when she got closer, the two men kind of grabbed her and took her towards the cafe. Apparently in 1999, a naval officer was at a brothel, and he said one of the working women told him that her name was Amy and that she needed to get away, she couldn't escape. So a lot of people, to this day, investigators don't believe that she had gone overboard. The evidence all suggests that Amy was taken against her will and maybe sold into the sex slave industry, you know, human trafficking. That naval officer would have gotten in trouble for being in a brothel, so he didn't come forward with the information until years later, you know. Another witness, Judy Maurer, who in 2015 was in a public washroom in Barbados, and she was in the stall, and she heard a couple of men come in, and she was like petrified. I mean, you're going, you know, you're doing your business, having a poop or whatever, and then all of a sudden these creepy men come barging in and start talking about like, oh, the deal's at this time, you better go through with it, you know, threatening. So the men leave. She hid in the stall, basically. The men leave, she gets out, and there's a young woman there who looks very distraught and was very quiet, very distraught. And so, yeah, she ended up asking the woman's name, and the woman said Amy. When shown a picture of Amy, Judy confirmed, like, that's the girl I saw, you know? So there's been quite a few sightings. Now, one of the fraudulent ones was this guy, I can't remember his name, but he claimed to be a former special forces officer or something like that. And he reached out to the Bradleys and said, I know your daughter is alive and she's been sold into the sex slave industry. I have proof. Apparently this nutcase was confirmed a con artist. Like, after a while, I think the Bradleys had ended up giving him like over $200,000 to aid his investigation. He came up with the excuse that, well, we can't just raid them right away. We need to set up all this, you know, intricate operation, and it needs to be funded and all this other stuff. So he asked for another. He sent them pictures as proof that she was alive and well. It was a picture of a woman on a beach with the same tattoo. Like, Amy had a tattoo of like a Chinese symbol on her right ankle, and then she had like a Tasmanian devil spinning a ball on her shoulder, on her back shoulder area. And he sent her pictures of a woman on a beach with these same tattoos, and there was a man beside her. So the Bradleys are, you know, thinking, okay, it must be Amy. So, but whenever he kept asking for more money, he asked for another $100,000. They got an investigator of their own, and this guy went down to Curacao and found, you know, staked out this con guy, and had to report to the Bradleys, unfortunately, that he was just a con artist. Apparently this sicko, the woman wasn't Amy in the pictures. He got this woman to go to a tattoo parlor and get the exact same tattoos as Amy to trick them. So when the Bradleys went back to Curacao and with Amy's brother to search some more, apparently the brother at one point, it's kind of sad because he could swear he heard Amy yelling his name. It was her voice, it was very distinct, and it seemed to be coming from a van that was driving by. So they followed the van, eventually stopping. It was just like a single guy inside the van, but that's kind of creepy, I think grief can do interesting things, and I think that maybe grief accounts for a lot of ghost sightings as well, because maybe he was so grief-stricken that and he wanted to hear his sister's voice so much that his brain actually did produce, from memory what she sounded like. Who knows? It's just very mysterious. So, very strange. So years later, someone anonymous sends pictures in the mail to the Bradleys, and it's a couple of photographs of a female escort. Apparently, they get wind that it's from a website, which is like a Caribbean escort service, which is where the pictures are from. And they had the photo analyzed, and the guy was like, "I would bet my career that this is Amy." Apparently, the resemblance is uncanny. If I find the pictures, I'll put them here. Let me know if you find it looks like her. Now the Canadian David Carmichael guy who saw her on the beach, I forgot to mention. Before, he described her tattoos to the T, which is how the parents think, it must be legit. There's a couple of people who have been able to identify her tattoos, so. Now, she's still missing to this day, so unfortunately, since 1998, she's been missing for quite a while. And it's just, when you hear about the sex slave industry, it's so heart-wrenching because what these women must go through, the abuse, the psychological torture, a lot of them get addicted to drugs and become dependent so they don't want to leave. It's just horrible. I hope that they really find her one day. So that's the case of Amy. Anyways, guys, I guess that's it for now. And yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.